And as usual, I am here if you need me, yellow.
Thank you, Seth. Okay, welcome everyone. Today is March 2nd, 2021. We are at 6:34 p.m. and we will start the meeting now. In response to Governor Baker's declaration of a public health emergency and the related emergency executive order dated March 12th, 2020, Town of Scituate public meetings shall meet remotely until further notice. This meeting will be recorded by Scituate Community Television and can be viewed live on Scituate Community Television, Facebook Live. The recorded meeting will be available the following day on Comcast Channel 9 and YouTube Scituate Community Television. Okay, I just want to again acknowledge, do a quick tribal acknowledgement again to the Wampanoag tribe, which inhabited the area where we're having the meeting tonight. And to consider something that I heard talked about, I believe it was on NPR, and it discussed incorporating the history of the first Thanksgiving through the eyes of the Wampanoag tribe. And that is something that the tribe has been working on for quite some time to incorporate it into our schools and our learning. Let's talk about the space this evening.
Nikki, could we have a call to order? It could be motion to mean, it can be in the meeting.
Oh, sure, sorry. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to convene the meeting. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I will call the roll. Reverend Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you, Reverend Stewart. Ms. Harriman.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Harriman. Ms. Risha.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Risha. Vice Chair.
Yes.
Ms. Dre.
Yes.
Mr. Oops, sorry. Ms. Yassin.
Yes.
And myself. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for reminding me. Okay, let's talk about norms and safe space. This is a safe space for people of color and for all underrepresented people in the community. Any comments that are inappropriate or have an animus in racism or bias will not be allowed. Your sound will be turned off if your comments are offensive to the meeting. This is a space where people can bring up challenges and questions without fear of repercussion or hostility. We take the learning but leave the story so that people feel comfortable sharing their experiences. And we assume best intentions. All participants are embarking on this journey at different starting points. And please listen, read, and be kind. Respectful language. Ask if you're unsure, and administrators will or may remove anyone with inappropriate contact or acting inappropriately. Okay, has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? Are there any comments on the minutes? Changes, questions?
I only had one question. So probably for Ruth. And by the way, fantastic job with this. It's not an enviable task. Under letter H, under discussion vote around the subcommittee on hate crimes, there's a mention, it says about G and H.
Those comments had to do with both G and H. The comment there was.
I knew it was a slightly stupid question. Thank you.
Because we were talking and they said, no, we're talking about both of these.
What
It's
is
like,
that?
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
That's okay.
Good. That was
Okay.
a splendid job.
Do we have a motion to accept minutes?
Is there any other, hold on, is there any other comments or corrections to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, then I will entertain a motion to accept them. Is there a
So moved.
motion?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second?
Second.
Wonderful. I'll call the roll. Reverend Stewart,
Yes.
Miss Harriman.
Yes.
Are you
Sorry.
muted? Wonderful. Miss Risha.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes.
Miss Dre,
Yes.
Miss Yassin,
Yes.
and my vote is also yes. Okay, so the minutes are now accepted. Thank you very much, Ruth, for doing a wonderful job with the minutes. Okay, so I've spoken to some of you about this next section on public comment. I think that we have established some goals and that it would be helpful, in my opinion, to have some input from community members of color and from underrepresented communities within our community to give us an idea of what recommendations they would like to see us make to the Board of Selectmen and what things they think the DEI committee maybe should cover. As it stands now, I don't know if anyone has the charge handy to read. Looking for it myself, actually. But essentially, our charge is to evaluate the town's policies, principles and procedures to ensure that, well, to ensure the eradication of racism, but also to ensure that people of color and those underrepresented in the community feel included and welcome in the community. So a
Nikki,
great
I
deal.
have it if you want me to read it.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay. And just for further reference, so I added another tab to the spreadsheet. Hopefully one-stop shopping for stuff like this. So the committee charge itself reads, excuse me, the establishment of an advisory committee to the Board of Selectmen, which should read Select Board, on equity and justice for all, whose charge is, number one, to review town policies, procedures, and budgets for the purpose of advancing equity and justice for all, with a focus on eradicating from the town of Scituate oppression, racism, injustice, and violence against all people. Number two, to report to the Select Board on the results of its work at least one time per calendar quarter. Number three, and to make recommendations based on the results of such work for the consideration of the Select Board within 12 months from the date of appointment of a chair of the committee.
Okay, so that is how the charge reads. I want to allow some public comment on the charge, on the DEI committee, and on what members of the community think, what they'd like to see from the DEI committee. As we solidify our goals and our process, I think this is a good time to kind of take a beat and check in to see where we are. And we might be just fine, but it's good to know. So I need to see if there is, I'd like to call first.
Madam Chair, can I ask for just a clarification on how
Go right
long
ahead.
this section will be? We
I
have a
don't-
full menu, so I want to make sure that we, are able
Right,
to
I'm
get to
very
the other
aware,
things we
yes,
prepared.
thank you. I'm very aware of the time. I've received constructive criticism that we should try and maintain about an hour and a half for this meeting in total. I'm very aware of that. I don't see a large number of people for comment, but I'd like to get to a few of them before we move into the rest of our agenda.
So Ms. Sanders,
We have a few raised hands.
There you go.
Okay, so I can't see whose hands are raised.
I can't either, and I'm supposed to be the one unmuting
Oh,
them.
no,
I
I
can.
can tell you.
I wonder.
I've got
Okay.
it.
Oh, I see. Okay, now I'm
Yeah.
seeing them. Okay, so so Nikki, shall I go ahead and call on folks and as we discussed?
Let's start with Stephanie Burke, and then the second hand is Emily Matthews.
Okay.
So let's start there.
And then I also have an email from Connor Doherty, which I'll read later on. He can't attend the meeting. He's asked me to read his statement.
Wonderful. All right, so we'll go
s-
Stephanie, Emily, and then we'll hear
And
Connor.
Stephanie, could you please identify yourself and state your address for us, please?
Yes, my name is Stephanie Burke. I live at 93 Marion Road. I also actually just sent Madam Chair a message to you from another person who couldn't attend.
Yes,
a woman
I'm
of
happy to
color.
read that as well. Yeah.
So one thing that I think I'm interested in the DEI committee doing that I know I had actually interviewed for the DEI committee as well, and I had mentioned, but I think the biggest thing that I felt when I came here was just the lack of representation of other cultures. And sometimes we have the argument that, well, it's mostly Irish. And I tell people, well, it's 48% Irish, which means it's 52% other, a combination of other cultures and ethnicities. And I'm not saying, I ran for the mayor of the St. Patrick's Day Parade. So I love all the Irish, celebrations we have. They're amazing, but we just to have an equal representation of other cultures as well. And so if the DEI committee could look at it, not just as policies and procedures, but also from the community aspect of it, and perhaps go back 12 months or maybe even 24 months because of COVID and look at the events that we've had in the town and look at those through an inclusive lens, and how can we, include more culture, or, whether it's Heritage Days and having a more of a inclusive, food booth or cultural acts or something, and just figuring out ways that we can just expand the celebrations and everything that does make Scituate great and fun and a place that comes together for celebration, and figuring out how we can make that more inclusive to other cultures and ethnicities. If that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. It does make sense. It makes complete sense. And I think one of the things you and I talked about was when there are permits that are requested for different programs or celebrations, that there's thought given to whether those permits are inclusive of as many people as possible from the community. And I think that's very important. So thank you for that. Miss Matthews.
Hi there.
Hi.
My name is Emily Matthews. My address is 158 Clap Road. I wanted to encourage the committee to work on gender neutral bathrooms for all town properties where bathrooms are available. Why do I think that this is an important charge? I think visibility and inclusivity matters. I went to the MFA recently, and they offer women's bathrooms, men's bathrooms, and gender neutral bathrooms. And I noticed it, and it made me feel good that there was an option for everyone available. Scituate's already making changes in our community to support gender neutrality. We've seen this with the select board adapting gender neutral language. But I think we have a lot more work to do. I've listened to the stories of Scituate high school students experiencing trauma because daily trauma, because they have to navigate the bathroom, quote unquote, situation. I think that it goes beyond students, that adults would appreciate this as well at the public schools. But I think it sends a clear message to our highly tourist town that we are supportive of and inclusive of the LGBTQIA plus community by offering gender neutral bathrooms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matthews. I do see another hand
Yep.
before we go.
Jackie,
into-
Jackie, would you like to identify yourself and your address, please?
Yeah, so I'm Jackie. I use she and her pronouns. I live at 7 Crescent Ave in Scituate. And I had two thoughts about the DEI committee and their charge, the work. I guess three thoughts about the work that they're doing. One is that while I hate to say we need to force people to do X, Y, Z, I wonder if the committee might be able to determine the value of some sort of town decided diversity quota, because I think, like people said, representation matters. And I think it's important that town entities have LGBTQ people running them in male-dominated works, or male-dominated sectors of our town, like government or whatever town entities we have. If there's a male-dominated kind of group, then maybe we say that you need to have some women be included, people of color, and maybe this isn't like you have to have it by next year, but maybe this is like part of a 5 to 10 year plan that by a certain date we are striving to include X number of marginalized people in each of these groups. And if that's not something that the committee researches and finds valuable, of course that is that is your charge to figure that out. But I know that a lot of times the only way to make sure those people get hired and included is to require that they are hired and included. So that was one thought I had. Another thought I had was I think Stephanie had kind of mentioned earlier about how I think Stephanie and Emily both mentioned the town of Scituate kind of signaling to our visitors and our tourists, because we have a really big tourist population, a lot of people coming to visit our town. We need to signal that we are an inclusive and affirming community. And I think a really great way of doing that is to consider, and I think maybe the town has to vote on this. And I took the poll about the community center, but figuring out a place where we can designate a hub for a diverse cultural center that acknowledges all of the different diverse communities we have here. So our Cape Verdean community, our LGBTQ community, communities of color, disabled communities, all of these communities can kind of have one central place where, Scituate Pride could run its educational talks, or we can run joint sessions or joint events with the food pantry to figure out how to serve some communities that need the help, or working with Scituate concerned citizens to bring to light some of the problems that they're trying to solve. So I think having a designated space where we say, this is where we want you to be seen and we want you to meet and kind of create a cultural center that other people visiting Scituate can look at and say, the town of Scituate really cares about its people. They have a public place where we recognize and advance the rights of all these people in our town. So those are two things. And the last thing very quickly I'll say is wherever possible, creating visibility between town government and town entities like the police department or public works, wherever it's appropriate, being able to create dialogue between those town employees and Scituate citizens. And I think that right now it's kind of hard to get that visibility and have those like dialogues, and coming here tonight is one of them. So I think these kind of things are really good, but it's, I think, hard. I think the committee should kind of figure out how it can be, how they can make those kind of conversations and that dialogue a little easier and a little bit more accessible for all people in Scituate, like post-COVID. So, you know, you're hearing more people's voices, and more people are listening when we have these types of conversations. So that was 3 things. I'm sorry, that was kind of a lot, but I guess a community building, diversity quota for town employees that are being, like, new employees being hired, and increasing the visibility of what certain town entities are doing and why it matters, so that community members can give feedback and have a dialogue. Thank you for letting me talk for so long.
Thank you, Jackie. And I think we have Emily has her hand up again. Emily, did you want to add something?
Actually, Ms. Harriman, before we go to Emily, can we hear from Craig and
Oh.
Lori from Scituate Concerned Citizens?
I'm so sorry, I didn't see the hand. I have to scan for hands. Craig, would you like to unmute yourself and please identify yourself and your address?
Craig Dias, 168 Stockbridge Road, from the Scituate Concerned Citizens, and been in the community a long time. And being as a black man, it's been very difficult, because whenever you speak out, you become a problem child in this community. If you're a black person and you just let things go by, you can fit in. And we have to have a place where people feel safe, where they could go to speak and to open up real dialogue. Because when we started a project with the hazardous waste dump on Stockbridge Road, I was told by a person in power, well, you don't want to become an adversarial person with this subject. And my question was to them is adversarial because we're trying to protect our community and we find there's problems, in our community, our lands could be contaminated. But when we had the Egypt Beach problem and those people spoke out, it wasn't adversarial. And a lot of black people and the people, brown people or poor white people in this town feel this way, but they're too scared to speak out because you don't know what the backlash is going to be. I've seen when it comes to permitting, I've seen in Jenkins' place for years and years and years, I've seen a lot that couldn't be used because it wasn't buildable. As soon as someone else buys it, all of a sudden it becomes buildable. So this is all this backdoor stuff that happens around here no one wants to talk about. You talk about a cultural center. We could have a cultural center at Pier 44. We bought Pier 44 when the railroad was being built with the MBTA money. Instead of putting sidewalks on Stockbridge Road in a poorer community, we bought Pier 44. Now we don't even know what we're going to do with Pier 44. Make that the cultural center. Make that a welcoming place for people to go. There's a lot of dark things that happen in this community that people don't want to talk about. And if you do talk about it, you become the naysayer. Yes, this is a beautiful community. I love the community, but there's a lot of underhanded stuff that's happening today. There's laws that are broken that people don't want to deal with. And as soon as you speak up about it, you become the problem. And I really don't care if people think I'm a problem or not. I want to shed light on certain things that could help the community. But I think I would like to see a task force or somewhat where people could feel comfortable coming to you and sharing their story without feeling that they're going to be retaliated from the powers to be. And when they're denied permits, they can go somewhere and say, why am I denied when this person wasn't? So there's so much more that I could speak about, but rules are for everybody. the rules that I have to follow by, my neighbor should have to follow by. It doesn't happen here, and people know it, but people won't speak up about it. And when you speak up about it, you're a problem person. So I would like for you guys to really reach out to the people at Jenkins Place. Reach out to Black people that are in this community, brown people, and the poor white people, so they can tell you how they feel. You know, yesterday on Scituate Monthly, you see the piece on the Ku Klux Klan. Sad. But then you say, well, we don't have the Klan in this town anymore, but there's subtleties where we have to feel uncomfortable. Sometimes I feel uncomfortable going into the town hall because there's nobody that looks like me, or very few. And another thing is, when you guys put the org chart up, color code that org chart so we can really see there's no diversity in this town. And how are we going to change that? But I'm thankful that you guys are taking on this task. I just wanted to have something. I just wanted to say this today, and I wish you the best. I'm just going to keep on speaking out though, because this is my town just as much as it's a rich person's town. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diaz. As always, insightful. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's see, there's one. Okay, let's do the last hand, which
Emily?
is Emily Matthews. Yep.
Emily?
Hi there, Emily Matthews, 158 Clap Road. I actually just was so stumbling over my words in my last comment. And I feel like Mr. Diaz's comment reinforces what I wanted to say, which is, thank you for giving our people of color and our marginalized groups
Uh-oh.
Oh.
options.
You cut out for a second.
Oh, I was just saying thank you for giving our people of color and marginalized groups the space to have these conversations and for asking these questions. Enough from me. We need to hear more from Mr. Diaz than we need to hear from me right now. But I just wanted to say thank you for that. Thanks for the work you're doing.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for always speaking out. Anyone else from the audience before we start reading comments we've received? Okay, we'll keep an eye on it. And
Madam Chair, can I talk about the comments that you want to read and process a little bit?
sure.
So it's never been my experience that somebody else's comments are read. What they usually are is they're sent in to the whole committee and put as a part of the agenda so you can read them as correspondence to everybody. I've just never known other people to read somebody else's statements. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Okay. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
What do we think? Would we like to hear from, let's see, I have a comment from Michelle Vasquez, and Vice Chair has a comment from Connor Doherty. Do we want to hear those?
So I guess my question for Maura is the proper way to go about this to, I would submit it as an agenda item to read as again, as part of the agenda in 2 weeks.
Yeah, you can have every meeting can have correspondence. So, and as you receive emails from different folks in the community, you can read those and share those and acknowledge that you as a committee have received them. And then it's, put into the public record. It's just difficult, Tom, I think, when somebody's reading on behalf of someone else without the committee really having knowledge of the validity of that. That's I think where you get into, and I'm not saying it's not valid between you and Connor, but I think if you can take that sort of logic, I think it's just to be more careful. I think those letters should just be sent in and everybody can read them, and then you can share them publicly at the next meeting. And the committee obviously doesn't have to wait to read them until the next committee. They can read them immediately upon, you sharing them with the folks. And then you want to enter them into the record.
Okay.
How are you feeling, Vice Chair, about sharing the comments now?
I mean, my particular situation, I mean, so Connor just couldn't make the meeting, so he just sent me this, 20 minutes ago. So
Okay.
I'm fine with tabling it. I'll send it post meeting to the committee, so you guys can read what he had to say. It's not War and Peace. It's a couple of sentences.
Okay.
So
Awesome. All right, we have one more hand. Mr. Diaz.
Mr. Diaz?
Will all comments be read, every correspondence from this point on then be read into the meetings, or the letters that we send in are they meant for the community or just for you to read
I
in the
think
future?
you have to say
Great
when you
question.
send it. Yeah, well, I think you have to say when you send it. I'm assuming based on conversations with Mr. Doherty that was meant for this particular meeting. But I think whoever you send it to, I think you have to say this is meant for the entire
The
committee.
committee, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Craig, I didn't mean to intend that you can't communicate back and forth with a committee member. Obviously you can, but if you're sending in a statement to the whole committee, then it's usually accepted in as correspondence and read aloud at the next minute and then also recorded. So I wasn't inferring that you can't communicate one-on-one with somebody at all. Hope that
Okay.
helps.
Ms. Thornton.
I think Craig was still trying to talk, but
Oh, Craig, are you done? I'm sorry.
where is he?
I didn't take it that way. I was just wondering because I've sent in many letters to the selectmen and they never get read out loud because maybe they're too lengthy or too much for. So I didn't know if it's different. This meeting is different than the selectmen's meeting because I have letters that I sent into the selectmen 2 years ago that still haven't even been answered. Never mind read into any meeting. So
Well,
that's
we
why
can take that up on the side if you want, Craig, and we can address some of that. We
I
certainly
know
don't.
it's always
We certainly
it's
don't
always,
read every email we receive from a resident,
I
so
understand.
we
It's
get
always good to take
thousands of them.
It's always good to take it up on the side, but I just wanted to make it known.
Yeah.
And this is a forum to do that. So thank you, though.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. All right, Ms. Thornton. Can you unmute yourself?
I actually was about to lower my hand. I think maybe I had misunderstood, but I guess I was just wondering. It just seems. I guess I'm just wondering, like, if someone emailed the committee member with the intent that their comment was going to be shared with the entire committee, like, wouldn't that be an acknowledgement that they want to share with the entire committee, and that if they had been here tonight, they would have shared with the entire committee as like public comment? I guess I'm just confused about like how all that. I don't know. It just
Hey, Nikki, just let them read it. I mean, it's short. Let's get through it and just let's make note moving forward. Like if there's any large correspondence that it comes directly and it's read to the committee, right? I don't think we need to make a huge issue out of it. Just trying to follow the process.
Okay, Vice Chair, would you do the honors, please?
Well, there's been quite a buildup for this, so I hope it lives up. All right. So Connor Doherty says he was hoping to state that I think equally important as looking into past decisions is addressing current decisions that are being made. I would hope that as an advisory body, there would be open and consistent information sharing from the select board as to what decisions are coming down the pipeline so that the DEI committee can advise on how to approach those decisions in an equitable, inclusive, and just manner.
Awesome. Okay, I will add, and I don't see any more hands, so I think we can probably wrap this section up, but I will add that I did receive an email from Carrie Borowski, who's on the steering committee of Stride. And her concern was that we include recommendations that all town meetings have a safe space and norms policy, so that everyone feels comfortable sharing and coming to meetings. And then I have a comment from Michelle Valesque, which says, having a DEI position would help ensure that students like me would be given some coping mechanism, training, and extra attention. It would have helped me to know a few adults who would check on me because I either felt too conspicuous and wanted to hide, or felt a longing to use my voice more freely, but couldn't express why it was so hard for me to do that. Okay, so that's from a student. All right, I think this exercise is important. It gives voice to people of color and people who are underrepresented in the community. I appreciate everyone who spoke tonight, and I know you know that I do. But I definitely appreciate you coming to this particular meeting, the first of our kind of open discussion about goals for this committee and things that we need to consider as we move forward with our analysis of the town and its policies and procedures. All right, with that, let's get into old business. The first order is review of committee goals. I actually contributed this to our agenda. I do think that our goals are a work in progress consistently. I think we are off to a very, very good start with our goals. I don't know if anyone has them to pull them up right now. And I'm just wondering how everyone else feels about them after some of the comments that were made tonight, or just thinking about them in general.
I'm gonna try and share my screen so you guys can see it.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Tom.
While you're doing that, I think I'll comment that
Can you guys see this?
yeah, if you could make it bigger, that'd be great. I don't know how to do that.
That didn't work.
Yeah. So one thing that I've come up against is the current charge and how to get it done with a committee of primarily white folks analyzing primarily white folks heads who are heads of the department on how they're doing with people of color. I think that requires us to dig into the community, and I don't feel like the charge is worded in such a way that that's understood. Although I do know from interviewing that that's the intent. So a lot of, sometimes people will say, well, why are we talking about that? That's not in the charge. The charge is very specific that we're only supposed to analyze the department's policies and procedures and principles. But I think part of that is asking people of color about these things and these departments and how it's working for them. I think tonight was a start. And I had a conversation with Ms. Dre about the fact that some people of color or some people from underrepresented communities won't come to a committee meeting and won't email anyone and won't send a letter to anyone. We have to go to them. Would you agree, Ms. Dre?
Yes, I agree completely. And, you know, I can't speak for every Cape Verdean in this town. I know a lot of the Cape Verdean residents, and some of them have been here, you know, 60, 70 years. And I think it's important to engage with them, you know, so obviously, you know, they're not going to be, you know, filling out surveys like Nikki said, but, you know, what I'm interested in is that community outreach, you know, speaking to the, you know, the folks, understanding what it is that they have concerns with and what we can do as a committee to make them feel, you know, welcome and, you know, heard. So yes, I think we have to look at different ways of engaging with the community.
Right. So, you know, if you're not talking to people of color daily and you're not talking to folks who identify as poor or disabled daily, then you don't know what, if any, concerns they have. So I do think, and I don't have the answer to what should be said, but I do think that that's necessary. But I'm not sure beyond that on how to address that in the charge, except to invite people in the community that are working with those that are underrepresented in our community, you know, on a daily basis or in an extremely direct and meaningful way. And so that our conversations are informed when we analyze the town, which I think is really important. Does anyone else want to contribute to that? Does anyone else have anything to say about the goals? Nothing?
I like the goals, Nikki. You know, you and
Okay.
I discussed them. I think they're broad enough that we can, you know, we can add to it. But I think, you know, I think we should set up a couple of subcommittees. And I don't know if we should discuss it now, but I think, you know, when I look at the charge and I look at, when I look at the charge and look at the committee goals, I think the committee goals go back to the charge. I think, you know, a subcommittee to work on the, you know, the reviewing of the policies, procedures, procurement, and then another subcommittee to work on the community education engagement. You know, I think those should be two subcommittees. I think, you know, you're going to get more, we'll be more productive in the subcommittees. And then the subcommittees, you know, doing a lot of the legwork and then coming back to the committee for, you know, further discussions. But I would propose setting up at least two subcommittees right from the start before we can actually get into, you know, the work involved behind these goals.
Yeah, I mean, I would also just quickly comment that I was jotting down notes during the public comment and then flipping back and forth to these goals to see if they fit, right? And just playing a little game, right? And I think most of what, you know, Jackie and Emily and Stephanie and Craig brought up, I'm not saying that we have it all nailed. There's a lot of work to do, but just to see if, you know, Craig talking about having a safe space and a forum in an outlet to be able to go and talk about some of these things that are happening. I think that's goal number 3. You follow me? So I mean, that's kind of the way that I was looking at this to see if we were really kind of missing the mark with our goals. And I was happy to see that at least I felt that a lot of the commentary, which was fantastic, was covered by this. Now we still have to execute on a ton of stuff to be able to realize all of this, but I felt like there was at least a general match.
Nikki,
I agree with you, Tom.
Yeah, yeah.
Go right ahead.
I'm just wondering, Nikki, first of all, I want to acknowledge your comment about this whole notion of, a bunch of white people going in to talk to white leaders about what the concerns are for people of color in the community. And that reverberated through every ounce of me. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I also think that it is up to us as white folks too, to be people doing the work and helping to break down some of these barriers. So, and I suspect that's the reason others are in this group as well. I guess in terms of going out to speak with people, Nikki, is there a way of doing that organically? For instance, with the charge that you have given various folks on the committee to go to different departments. For instance, if I went to the Council on Aging, is there a way that we could identify people who utilize the Council on Aging services who are also people of color or people who represent other marginalized groups, and speak with them separately? Or are there any surveys done of people who take advantage of town services so that we have that information broken down by demographics?
Yeah, okay. So one, it's a very good question. I really appreciate your comment. Race is very difficult to talk about. It's very difficult to talk about, and people clam up and it's just uncomfortable. And then people throw out things, well, you're racist. And if you don't cringe at that, then you should be concerned. But if you do, then you're kind of in the right spot, which is kind of strange, but true. People of color, to my understanding, are not really using the senior services. They don't cater to what they would like to see in a senior center. That's one. Number two, Hingham Community Council has developed a community survey for stakeholders asking about, what do you think is going on in the community? Do you think there is racism? Do you know what to do if you experience it? Do you know what to do if you see someone else experiencing it? I can't remember all of the questions, but they're doing a community survey, and I believe we should be involved with that, like now, because that would inform us very much on how to move forward with each of our individual departments. And Miss Michelle Crawford, I do see your hand. I just want to let you know that. But I do think that being okay with talking about race, particularly if you're on this committee, and saying, calling things what they are, I hope that we can quickly get comfortable with that, because that's what's necessary, even though it may be difficult. And number two, surveying the community in a meaningful way. Ms. Dre, do you want to share some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I was, talking about, I could walk in my neighborhood and just have a conversation with my neighbors, my Asian neighbor, my Cape Verdean neighbor, my, LGBT, so I think, Nikki, when you talked about, a lot of people, people of color not utilizing some of the services or the senior center, I think you're going to have some hesitation too on how comfortable they feel about talking about the town, whether it's negative or positive. I'm sure most of them would love to tell you positive stories, but to get to the real meaning or the real feelings they have, whether it's an interaction with, someone at the town hall or, in the minority community, especially the cultural differences, there's some hesitation to really be completely open and honest, so we have to build, get their trust to, say, the town. I was speaking to my neighbor this summer, and I was telling her about some of the things that the town was doing, and she was surprised. She's, 79 years old. She's been here for, probably, 60 years. And she says, I love this town. I love this town, almost to the point, like, don't, I don't want any problems, but, I think she was happy to hear that the town wants them, wants everyone to feel, included and, embracing diversity. But I don't know how much of it she believed was really going to change anything too, So, I think there's a little challenge there. But I think, getting a subcommittee and getting other people in the community to help us with the community engagement, I think would be a good thing to do.
I agree with that. I do want to give Ms. Crawford a chance to talk. Ms. Harriman, do you still have the ability to unmute people? Or, let me see.
I think with the screen share, I can't, oh, wait a minute, here we go.
All set.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's unmuted.
Okay, go right ahead, Ms. Crawford.
Director at Scituate Public Schools. I'm sorry I'm not showing my face tonight. I'm sick and I look it. I wanted to suggest something with regard to the reaching out of.
Ms. Crawford, could you speak up a tiny bit more? It's a little.
I wanted to suggest something
There
with
you are.
regard to the outreach towards marginalized populations. And this is something that I did for a teachers union as their diversity chair. Is we did some community-based participatory action research. We actually brought in UMass Boston Patricia Kruger-Henney in to help us with this work. And what it was us working as a smaller group of participants to train ourselves up to go out into the community, to do small groups of conversations to figure out what the community wanted. And it wasn't why aren't you using the senior center, but tell us what services you want. So that we could gauge what it is people wanted. It wasn't to tell us all the bad things going on. And if that came up in the conversation, it did. So we were really strategic about the questions we were asking and how we were gathering the data and inputting it. It was just a suggestion. And Patricia Kruger-Henney would be a good person to connect with.
Okay, that's wonderful. If you if you have that contact information, that would be a great person to talk to and maybe see what kind of involvement she might have in this process as well.
I can email you the information.
Thank you so much. And thanks for being here tonight. I know you're sick.
You're welcome.
Okay, so that is our goals. Are there any other comments about the goals? Questions? We like them as they are. Okay.
I think it's a great idea to reach out via a survey as you move through the process to find out questions to ask. Nikki, when I hear that folks fear retaliation, that makes me really sad. So if there's a way in which we can do a survey that is anonymous, but maybe there's a way in which for them to identify their race, so we can identify whether or not they are under represented constituents. I think you guys should consider that. I think it would be great feedback for all of us to have.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Okay. Let's move forward.
I'm sorry, Nikki. So
Yep,
are
go
we
right ahead.
also proceeding with Angela's recommendation of dividing the work between two groups, one focused on the community engagement and the other on the policies? Because I do think that could be a way of, as we think of like, what can we do to build trust, getting that one group, working on community engagement now would be helpful to inform the full process and meeting people where they are. So they're not coming to us, but if there are community gatherings virtually, or once we get back to in person and having those connections, that would be helpful to the long-term work too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Do others agree with that? I see some heads nodding. I don't see. Does anyone else want to comment on that?
I think
Okay.
I think we need more discussion on it, but I think it certainly 10,000 feet. It sounds. I'm on board. I mean, I think it's a great idea.
All right.
I mean, I appreciate, and not to continue calling out Craig, but Craig is able to come here and be open and honest with us and share his thoughts that others in the community also undoubtedly have, right? And how can we engage
More Craigs? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that would be fantastic. And that's the goal. But if we can't bring them to us, we've got to figure that out. I think we should move on from this. I think something really major came out of this, which was creating community engagement and policy procedures procurement groups. Let's talk about that at the next meeting because we have a lot to address at this meeting. So if we could add that to the next meeting. Thank you, Ruth. I see the thumbs up. Appreciate it. And next, I wanted to have some discussion and a vote on a youth subcommittee and a subcommittee on hate crimes or incidents based in bias. And just my thoughts on those two were this. We're supposed to make recommendations about how the town can do better or is already doing well with policies and procedures that assist those who are underrepresented in living, a full and happy life here. And part of that is keeping track of what's going on, which we don't have time to do. And also the perspective of young people. And I think that there have been groups created in the middle school now, as well as the high school. And it would be nice to know what's going on there. That being said, I do understand that there is kind of this chasm between school and the select board. And we're going to talk about Ms. Arnold in a minute, but I do think a youth perspective is important as we make recommendations to a board that could actually, create policy or, institute policy that based on their suggestions. And then I'll say one more thing and we can move on to to a vote unless anybody else has things to add. And then with the hate crime subcommittee, I do think we need to have a place for people to go to report. And I think if we can offer that in whatever way we can, whether anonymous or directly, I think that's important. And we talked about reading things into the record or into the meeting. And I think that's essential because if people do feel like this is a place to come and air grievances related to feeling underrepresented in this community, we're probably gonna have to read some stuff that people don't necessarily want us to say or don't say their name, attach their name to, or, they don't have the confidence to come and speak to us directly about it. So keeping in mind that our task is to make recommendations, I feel that we need to be fully formed in those recommendations, but we don't have the bandwidth for these two things. And I know that there are people in the community ready and willing and able to collect that information for us and to suggest recommendations for us as well. So does anyone have any? Yes, Ms. Yassin.
First of all, a clarification that if we had a subcommittee, somebody from this committee would be on that subcommittee. So, having bandwidth, we have to have bandwidth. Otherwise, we don't have a subcommittee because we don't farm out the work. We're participatory, but it is a way for us as individual members to go out and encourage, a greater group participation. Again, there were so many people who interviewed for this committee who said, yes, they'd love to be involved. And so when we start forming subcommittees like this, I think we will have to get that out to more people so that they can be involved. On these two subcommittees, they've come up to us multiple times, but I have never seen in writing a charge. What exactly would these do? And I need this in writing. I need to be able to see this is what this subcommittee would do, what they're responsible for, what's their deliverable, what do they do, rather than listen and talk. I mean, what specifically are they doing? And I think that both of these issues are huge, and they're very emotional issues, and they're very important issues that we can't ignore. But I can't vote for a subcommittee unless I have in writing what it will do and how it will do it.
Gotcha. I would envision that the charge would be the same as ours, but focused on whatever, task or issue of the group, it with the added piece of reporting to us and collection of information.
So could you meet
and I think that's what we're interested
in some people who are interested in doing this and get something written up for us for next time. And again, for a little time to be able to see it before we meet. But to have written before us what the people who would be involved in this would think that this is what they would be doing.
Okay, thanks for that.
Nikki,
Anyone else?
I think I'm worried, and maybe it's just my maybe I'm just not that articulate, or I don't process well at this hour. But I'm worried that there are so many things that need to be done in any community in this regard, and I'm worried we're trying so hard to do everything that we haven't gotten any teeth in anything yet. I'm worried that we keep sort of identifying new things to do, and I'm wondering if it makes sense to just start somewhere and then begin. For instance, I don't feel like we've really had a full discussion as a committee on these groups. That we touched on it. I don't think we had the advantage last time of Maura's presence, because I'm wondering, being a bit of a rule follower, do we, is this within the scope of this group? Of course, it has to be somewhere, but is it, and I don't know if Maura can speak to that. I don't know, as sort of the liaison to this committee, Maura, what your leeway is in terms of guiding us.
I'm happy to comment. I think you both have brought up some pretty salient points that I think it's important to have an understanding as to what these subcommittees can do. Usually when you do subcommittees, it's when those particular folks that are on a standing committee, like all of you are, need that additional help to go out and do and conduct the role in the business, ultimately to come back and serve the purpose, if you will. I sometimes feel that I think there's so much to do in this committee, and I think what Angela had brought up earlier, in my opinion, is more important than creating two more subcommittees that aren't really initially on task. And in my mind, if you want to create a hate crimes task force somewhere down the road, that would be a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen to create that. And I think the board would also agree with that, because there is a place for people to report hate crimes. We have a police department, we have the civil defense, and the definition of a hate crime is also very specific. So I get worried, when we start throwing out these terms, that we're not being, factual, if you will, with regards to what is a hate crime, right? People obviously get treated poorly every day, right? Every day in every community around America. And unfortunately, Scituate is subject to that too. But are they crimes? maybe not. I don't know, right? Some of them may be, some of them may not be, but I don't think any of us are in a position to determine whether or not it's a crime or not. That's what our law enforcement does. So anyway, long answer to a short question. Again, subcommittees are usually created if the body feels the need to have that extra help to go out and conduct their charge. And I agree with some of the commentary that I've heard about, I think you all need to know what those subcommittees really are going to do before you create them. So hopefully that helps, and just my opinion.
So Ms. Harriman, I wanted to speak to something that you said about, we have so much and we're adding more and we're adding more. My fear is the opposite. My fear is that we'll miss something, right? That we'll be chugging along and create goals and have questions, and we're not even asking the right questions because we don't have that information. Subcommittees like Ms. Selectwoman Kern said are for decreasing the load, right? And that's the intention here, is to decrease the load. Also, hate crimes can be changed. It can be changed. We can make it something else, but you cannot recommend. You can't recommend much if you don't know what's really going on, right? We don't like to believe that there's not much going on, and that a subcommittee like that wouldn't have much to do. But unfortunately, I don't think that's true. And also, it's informative for whatever recommendations you think. Tonight, I heard a recommendation more than once about making Pier 44 Cultural Center. That wasn't even on our radar. We were knee deep in driving Mr. Clark crazy. or having Angela get us, I'm sorry, not Angela, Lieutenant O'Shea get us answers. So I think things that aren't on your radar will pop up. I don't have a high schooler, I have a middle schooler, but we don't have any idea what's going on there. I don't. So writing things down, I mean, do we even want to write things down? Is that something that we want to do? And people want to see it in writing before they vote? We can vote now.
Well, I
or
think
we can.
Sorry, Nikki. I think picking up on what you and Kim said, I think what I'm hearing actually of like your the assessed need is the perspective. Like we need to get out other perspectives from communities of color, underserved communities. And if it's perspective that we want, I think maybe then the process is not to create a subcommittee, but is it a liaison? Is it check-ins with the community? Is it community engagement? Going back to what Angela was saying in those two groups, and like pursuing that right away and making sure we seek out those perspectives, build trust, etc. Because I also, going back to like the interviews for this committee, I remember the select board asked like, what is the perspectives like we need to have on the committee? And not one of us said a youth voice. And maybe now in retrospect, that was something that was missing and we should have vocalized. So maybe, and I'm getting way ahead of myself here, maybe that's what we figure out is like, maybe we have that youth perspective and recommend to the select board that we add a youth voice to the committee as a voting member. And I know we wanted to talk about adding Lucia as a voting member. So that might actually even out with the numbers that we needed if we added the two, because I know there was, and Maura knows way more about this than I do, but I'm just trying to simplify and figure out like, what is it that we really want? And I think what you're saying, Nikki, is that we need that additional perspective, right?
Yeah, well, we need that information.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I want, is the information. I feel like we're ready to vote on this. Am I wrong?
All you need is a motion,
so.
a second, and then a vote. So You can vote anytime you wish.
I thought there was some concern, and that I share, that maybe we need to have a better defined mission for these subcommittees and the tasks.
Okay, so is there interest enough to have a tentative charge created? Let's do it that way.
I would say yes. I would say yes to that.
Okay.
I think like my take on all of this is that at this point, you know, I'd put another tab in the spreadsheet because, and it's no one's fault, but I've kind of lost track of what the subcommittees even are, just to be perfectly honest with you, right? So there's, in the conversations, some of the conversations I had last week with Bob and Celia and Ruth, and I mean, there's 22 town departments, right? Are they all subcommittees? I'm not sure. We're talking about a hate crime subcommittee, a youth subcommittee. I do fear that it's getting a little unwieldy, and I do want that, you know, eventually we're gonna have to execute, right? And we're gonna have to get things done that marry up to the goals that then manifest themselves in recommendations that we go to the select board with, right? And it's okay that we're not there yet. We're not there yet. And we have to get to a point where we start making progress towards those recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I will draft something for us to review at the next meeting so we can move along. I'll say this, we've had a presentation from some youth from the community and something read tonight as well from a youth of color. We've also had discussions of what's going on in the community, and there was even comments tonight that there's things that people feel are not being addressed properly, and you know, from younger members of the community and older members of the community. So my feeling is that this is information that we need to inform us, and a way to get that without straying too far from our reports. The other thing I'll say is that we decided as a committee not to present on any departments in June. Was it June? Sorry, in April. Right? So the first thing we were going to do was low-hanging fruit and report on our organizational efforts. Is that right? That's what we said.
Yes.
Okay. So that being said, on the one hand, I was like, shoot, we're not going to be getting into things rapidly enough. On the other hand, I was like, maybe we should step back, take a broader view and see, are we missing anything? Right. And I think the comment that was made that instead of, you know, what's wrong with the town, maybe approaching it from what would you like to see that doesn't currently exist. I think we could learn a lot from that type of a question.
Totally agree.
So let's move on. I will draft something and we'll take a look at it at the next meeting. Okay, next up. I lost my agenda. Ruth, do you want to tell us what's next? Hold on.
Yeah, it is the discussion vote questions to ask town boards, committees, and next steps.
Okay, and that is Mr. Clark, Ms. Risha, Mr. Secor, and Ms. Yassin. So take it away. I do want to say that I'm losing charge, so I'm going to be addressing that, but I'm still here. So go right ahead.
All right, so I'm going back into share mode. Okay. Does everybody see that?
We see you.
I see that.
Goodness. You don't see a spreadsheet? You don't see a spreadsheet?
Yeah,
I can see it.
Oh, wait, yes, now I do. Yeah,
can see a spreadsheet.
okay.
Pretty good with me. Okay. All right. So before I get to the questions, and I know we're going to talk about Slack, but you know, I've put, I think, 3 versions of this out on Slack now with the help of Ruth and Bob and Celia, like I said. So there's a few tabs in here. I'm not going to go through and read every word at this point. I mean, like I've said before, and Maura, I mean, call me out if I'm violating policy, but the idea is I'll put this out on Slack. If people have questions, comments, what have you, they can email me directly, and I'll make the appropriate changes. Okay.
Yeah, Tom, I did cover the questions. Angela had sent some, I think you did too as well. So a couple of things, the process I think that you're following, we thought was good, right? So people aren't allowed to go in there and change it. They have to either go to you or somebody else to make the changes. But what we do need to do is ensure that either Lorraine or Michelle has administrative access to it, because these documents, because you're a public committee, are public, right? So if somebody else wants to see them, we need to have access to go out and grab them and share them, especially if somebody comes with a Freedom of Information Act request. You know, those are always facilitated by Michelle or Lorraine. So if you guys can ensure that one of them has access, and I don't even know if Slack requires administrative rights, Tom. I'm just not that familiar with Slack, but whatever they need to be able to go in there and pull documents, because we also need to file them and archive them. So that's the challenge, but I think we've figured out a way how to work through it and meet some of those requirements. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I think so. And I'm looking at Angela.
No, that's, I think Celia is more familiar with Slack than I am. My question that I had though, and Celia, you may be able to answer that. Should all the channels be private? And then, so that way only the individuals that have the link and are identified as eligible to see those channels. Is that what we should do?
Well, we can keep them as is, Angela, and just invite Lorraine, and I'm sorry, I missed the other individual's name that Maura stated, but we can invite them both so they have access. So at any point they can pull those documents.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I think if the entire channels are public, then, you know, people can randomly come in and like the equivalent of Zoom bombing us.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, great. All right. So the norms and guiding principles, I mean, there was a lot of good commentary 2 weeks ago. I specifically recall, you know, Lucia making some great comments. A number of people made comments. So these are the kind of norms and guiding principles which really help inform the process, which I need to make bigger, I would assume. So here's the approach and process. All the questions at this point, which are on the subsequent tabs, are all, well, they're all exactly the same, to be honest, because we boiled it down to 7 questions. But before we get to that, I think this piece here is key, which is, as you can see, the approach and process. So, and a lot of this is what we discussed 2 weeks ago. And then what we tried to do is list out kind of step by step. And this isn't final because, you know, I think everyone still needs to review it. I just put the last copy up over the weekend, I think. So I'm assuming people haven't had a chance to go through this and question it and what have you. But so the idea, generally speaking, is some of the initial meetings, and we're going to have to prioritize this stuff, and discussion needs to happen. Like I said, there's 22 town departments. Now we're talking about potentially other subcommittees and so forth. So once we designated who we want to meet with, we would recommend that an initial meeting chaired by Maura and Bob to meet with the department heads, and as you can see, to explain what this process is going to look like, why we're here, what's our charge, etc. Then the questionnaire, again, it's these 7 questions, open-ended questions, will go out. We don't necessarily expect them to fill it out. This is just a heads up. This is what we're going to talk about. And then we have the actual meeting itself, right? So that would entail whoever's on that particular subcommittee and an applicable department head or whoever they designate. If there are additional, non-voting committee members that can attend, that's great. And you can see under step 3 how we intend to go about that, all while following the norms and guiding principles, so that especially in this initial meeting, it's something where hopefully we can make them comfortable talking about a series of uncomfortable topics. Okay. Step 4 is presenting the findings in this meeting. Okay. And we are not necessarily going to drag the department heads in front of this committee every time there's a discussion. If there's a specific recommendation and so forth, yeah, we can discuss that. But so that this is essentially what we talked about, if there's any commentary at this point.
Tom, I just want to add, I did, again, there's a number of departments, and I took a look at that list, and I tried to sort of group some of them together. It just, if we could have, the finance and assessors department and treasurer collectors together, because it's a sort of some common functions. DPW, I don't know if you have to meet individually with grounds and highway and sewer and transfer, So we were able to dwindle it down a little bit. So I think it probably would end up being like 12 or 13 different meetings, either department heads or groups of department heads. Some of the larger departments, like the library, I think you probably want to, meet with them individually, or the police or fire individually. So we were able to dwindle it down a little bit.
Okay, great. That is good to know.
I think this is great work, guys, whoever was on this team. Thank you.
So then, all right, so the questions themselves, let me make this bigger. So these are the questions. So again, looking to create open-ended questions. Nikki's trying to get back in. Okay. We'll just tell Nikki that we voted on this and we just move on, right? So 7 questions, open-ended. We would expect, whoever wants to the extent possible, we talked about this, have, if we subcommittees, multiple subcommittee members, 2, 3, obviously less than a quorum in these meetings. Someone can ask the questions, another person is the scribe, but creating that dialogue and creating a safe space for these meetings, for lack of a better word, to go and begin getting the answers to these questions. So this is what we came up with.
So Tom, can I just ask a quick question? So these aren't these are the questions that we would ask directly to the different department heads, not the ones that Bob or whomever could answer
Correct.
for us. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, just wanted to make that.
Yeah, I mean, some of the other, org charts, metrics, diversity numbers that they have at their disposal. Yeah, they're gonna hopefully get that for us.
Okay.
Yeah. And hopefully. we can-
Sorry, I'm back. Technical difficulties tonight. I mean, like awfully so. Figuring it all out.
How much did you miss?
I missed, well, I've read all of the questions. I think they're very good. I missed a lot. I missed a lot. But let's talk about the questions. Does anyone else want to contribute to the questions? Are these the questions we're going to ask? Is everyone okay with that?
I really like these questions. I think, Nikki, it met a lot of the things you were talking about last time. Number one, we have pared it down a lot. Again, things that we can get from Bob or other sources. We don't have to ask the department heads for that information. Anything that's numbers related, we can get from other sources. And it's not really part of, again, that conversation piece that I think is so valuable from this. The other is that these are all open-ended for the most part. We worded them carefully so that it's hard to give just a yes or no answer. It's still possible, but more encouraging people to actually be thoughtful and see what can you come up with. I think for some things, maybe people haven't really thought about this before, and this becomes their space for them to think about these issues within their department. These may not have all the recommendations that we end up going on, but it's a start, and it's part of making the town department heads feel like they are part of this effort, because the more we can include them in this process, I think the more successful we'll be. One of the things we don't have now is the other tab, which showed there's a step 5. And Tom, I don't know if that all came through. I know when I was looking at it, I had a hard time viewing that step 5 is going into that depth a little bit more, where then there's follow-up with the town personnel. So right now we're talking about only department head, but then town personnel is another whole kind of questioning series, which may be, again, by this may be the anonymous questionnaire kind of thing. The department heads, it's not anonymous. You're standing behind what you're saying about your department. But for personnel, it may be anonymous, or if they wish to give us their information, of course they could, on what are some of the issues that they see, which may not have the same answers as what the department heads have said. So, but that's another step. And again, I think what we have to be careful with is we can't take too big a bite. We have to decide on bite, do it, analyze what we're getting, and seeing where our next steps go before we try to do everything all at once. And that's why I like the way Tom set this up also, as step by step by step, so we can see where we're going and where we are. And between step 4, where we start talking to each other, and step 5, maybe at the same time as we're talking, we're doing things to think about how are we involving the members of the town committees and boards in this process. And I think of what we've talked about tonight, this may not be the only thing we're doing. Okay, as we've started talking about the other goals that we have for community engagement, etc. This is a lot right here for us to do. We can simplify this a bit if people wish to, but it does involve all of us going in and talking with people, which I think is fantastic. But I don't think we're going to be left with nothing to do.
I really liked the questions, and I really liked the process a lot. I like that it was setting us up to have a friendly discussion and open-endedness, and not like we're coming in as like the DEI police or something like that, but we're here to help and support and find out, I particularly like the question about what are your obstacles right now, to sort of really dig in and help them think more, and for us to learn from them what they might find as their obstacles to becoming more diverse. And I think that's going to inform us a lot about the kind of recommendations that we can make. I also liked the fact that I felt like we were doing this more as a little subgroup committee, like you said, Tom, like less than a quorum groups going to each department and having this conversation, rather than just one of us in the department, because more of us can hear each department's responses that way, and we get it. I think everybody hears things a little bit differently and remembers things all in slightly different contexts. So I just think that gives us a fuller understanding of each department by having more of us go. So I really appreciate this work that you guys did and the questions and the process. So thank you.
I guess I wanted to comment on, there's been a lot of talk of not being offensive or not scaring people away, or and I don't know that that's the intention of anyone on this committee, but I think we need to be cognizant of what we're doing here. There are people in our community that have been severely injured, emotionally, mentally, and not just because of things that have happened to them directly, but because of things that have happened to people who may look like them. So I think we need to be a tiny bit less concerned about feelings, and I get it. It's like, well, we don't want to scare people away. They're not going to give us the information we need. It's their job to answer the questions. It's their job to give us the information. I don't believe anyone on this committee would ever be disrespectful or purposely make someone feel uncomfortable. But I do think that as people listen to these meetings and we talk about, having concern for people being upset with us or us being a little too much for people, it can sit very differently depending on who you are. And keep in mind that, everyone we're talking to in terms of department heads is not of color, right? Every single person we're talking to is not of color. If they were, would we be as sensitive to their feelings, right? They're doing what their job is, which is to answer these questions and assist us with getting the information we need to make recommendations. So, and they're adults, and no one here is going to be acting in any offensive way. So I think when we say these things, I don't think there's ill intention. The intention is to get the information that you want, but I think that certain members of our community could care less about the feelings of, town members on answering questions that they're supposed to answer anyway, because no one's really cared about what they're thinking until this committee's been created. So I think we have to be very careful with that. And that's from feedback, but also from me. Are there any other questions, comments on the questions? Are these the questions we're going forward with and using? Should we have another look at these before we vote? Are we ready to vote?
I like the questions, and I like what Ruth pointed out, the step 5, which is going actually speaking to personnel and not just the department heads. I forget, it's not in this tab.
Let me go back, sir.
Yeah, because I think it's important to, obviously speak to the department heads, but the actual personnel, because the perception may not be the same. So I think that's an important step to add. The only other thing that I would say here, maybe there's a need to go back before we get to step 4 of the findings. We could, after we gather questions from other departments, we may find there was a question asked for one department that wasn't asked from this one, that we might want to go back. So I think we should have a step, if needed, follow up with additional questions before we actually present any findings.
It's a good point. I mean, we could almost flip them. 5 and 4.
Ms. Crawford, your hand is raised. Did you want to contribute?
I wanted to contribute. So under the question of diverse hires, I would like you to consider asking the question about where the jobs are being posted and how they're being posted, because the interview is two-way, and it begins at the point of where a person views a job and see if they would be represented there or accepted there or not. And that's just me as a woman of color. That's what I do in looking for a position. The other thing is what support do they need to ensure that they can maintain a diverse a diverse workforce? Because it's one thing to hire diversity, it's another thing to retain it.
Question 7 does actually talk about retention as well, so.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
I'm glad you brought it up though, because we specifically talked about retention in one of our meetings. Yeah.
So something that I know, thank you very much, Ms. Crawford. Something that I noticed too was money. So who's making what in your department? I know that it's publicly listed, but I don't know that it's that easy to find. So for instance, the police force has a number of women on the police force, which is fantastic. But what are they getting paid in comparison to their male counterparts? And then something else I didn't see was, support. So like, is there an incident happens, it's resolved in some way. And even the student who sent something in to be read tonight said, I wish that there was a place for me to go to basically find for me to go that comforted me. I'm paraphrasing, but basically she was looking for a place to go to have someone check in on her after something happened. So I don't know if those are things for us to dive in deeper later. I don't necessarily agree with the process entirely. But I do agree with the small groups. And I think, most of the questions are fine. I would just like to see us address the money issue, women to men or women, to have that broken down by ethnicity, and also women to men. And then also a question about support, should anything happen. I mean, even if
Nikki, are you talking about support for the public, should anything happen?
No, I'm talking about we're talking about department questions, right?
Oh, okay, because I thought that comment was from somebody out that did not work from
No, okay, so I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. So
kind of
I
follow,
read,
yeah.
I read a statement tonight from a student who
Right.
basically expressed that she wished that she had had someone check in on her and had more support. And I'm just wondering about mechanisms like that in the town. Are there, people
That's a
that,
great question.
So,
you know,
so Nikki, you talk about like specifically a situation in which someone in the workplace feels they've been harassed or discriminated against, and what level of support they receive in the workplace? You're talking about an employee experience?
yes, I'm talking about a town employee, right? So I'd like to hear what exists or doesn't or should or they want or could use help with or whatever. I'd like to hear that.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, and again, I think we need to, one of the things I do want to ultimately work on is town-wide anti-discrimination, harassment, and retaliation policy. And then through that, I mean, I guess, typically you don't in those policies, you don't typically see things around what additional support someone may receive. I mean, often what we may do is referring to an EAP program if that's something that the individual needs. Often in those situations, in my experiences, the person who's the complainant is often wanting to keep everything particularly confidential and for obvious reasons, and so often that's a role that ultimately falls on my shoulders is how we support that individual. But I think we can certainly have further conversation about that. And the one other thing that you mentioned, Nikki, and it may be something that I can provide, is you were asking about some information on compensation across the town and how it may be sort of, and if we'll see any disparity, particularly regarding gender. But that's something I can gather that information as well. I'm not sure that will be particularly fruitful trying to pull that information from department heads, but that's another example of something that I think I could relatively easily pull together. So.
Yeah, I think to add to that, Bob, Nikki, I think we purposely didn't include questions in here that we could have just sent to Bob or Lucia or Mandy to help us with. And maybe if there are questions like compensation, Nikki, and others that come to mind, maybe we just start a running list of questions, and as they come, we utilize Bob and the others and have them pull that information for us, and focus the departments on other like more open-ended conversational type questions.
And can I suggest that for these questions, these general questions, and I thank you, Celia, I love the idea about, we already started a list and we should probably just kind of add to it, because I think that we have a lot of different questions we want to end up dealing with. For this bite though, would people like to look at it some more, develop any questions or any suggestions of how you want things reworded and send it in to Tom? The group can meet again and go over this and resubmit back to our meeting in 2 weeks. But if people would kind of look these things over, put something down in writing of what you'd like to see, and then we can respond whether we can get this from a different venue or whether we would want to reword or put something in, because I don't think we can reword the questions now during this meeting.
Right.
Right.
I just wanted to respond to Mr. Clark's comments. I'm looking for something beyond the required harassment and discrimination policy. I'm looking for what's in place for support. If it's just you, then it's just you, and we should know that. But I feel like, it should be answered because we're collecting information. So that should be part of the information that we collect. No, every department says, no, there isn't something beyond the support offered by Mr. Clark. I mean, I think it's important to collect that information from employees and department heads so that we have that collected and in writing. Let's move this. I agree with you, Ms. Justine. Does anyone else have a problem with reviewing them and sending written responses to Vice Chair Secor? No? Okay. All right, suggestions for initiatives, Mr. Clark, Lieutenant O'Shea, and Miss Silvera.
So I think I can address that. So, you know, I discussed previously with everyone that the town, we haven't really had a personnel handbook per se. Again, we've only had a human resources department for a couple of years. And so previously, a lot of the policies and procedures in the department, many of those policies really were encompassed in the union contract. So, and needless to say, you know, if we're just referencing union contracts, often the language is lacking. So that's something that I've been working on, a pretty comprehensive personnel policy, and it's a pretty cumbersome process. But I've been going through that process. But as I look through it, there's a number of policies that we're in the midst of developing that I think, you know, I definitely want to take advantage of this opportunity with the work with this committee to review some of those policies with the group and see, you know, how they may be tweaked to make sure that we're ensuring, you know, that we're working towards this common goal. So, you know, like for instance, again, I just mentioned it, the anti-discrimination, harassment, retaliation policy is something that we need to finalize. We need to work on a Corey policy. We have a social media policy. I looked at it recently and it looks like it may be sufficient, but you know, maybe we dust that off and take a look at it and see if we have to tweak that in some way. So I guess my recommendation, I think, would be that maybe, again, it's another subcommittee, but maybe there's a few. I don't think we want to, in this forum, be going through a 8-page anti-discrimination harassment policy. So maybe if a couple of us could just like work on the side and review some of these, it may be, we talk about low-hanging fruit, we may be able to get through these relatively quickly. So so that's something I think we could probably get to relatively easily. That being said, just to know that we ultimately need to then, particularly any real sort of policy changes that impact the terms and conditions of employment, we typically want to talk to the unions about that. We have 4 different unions, 6 different bargaining units. So so that's a process we'll have to go through as well. But I think it's all worthwhile. So I guess my suggestion would be that maybe there's a few of us just work on the side as another subcommittee and look at some of those policies.
Bob, would you be interested in, like we have done, I think with our recent one with questions, where the information goes out to the overall committee, and then anyone can comment back, right. And then the small group works on those comments, understanding that, these really are comments. This is not ours, that we cannot create this. This is yours to create, and we'll have to go to the union. But then we can help you integrate some of that in. But rather than just having 3 of us look at the documents, anybody who would be interested in doing so could look at it and get those comments back to a small group.
Right. That would work.
Yeah, it would be fantastic to see what is in existence now, if you would be willing to share that. What that looks like now. I understand that you're trying to work on creating or tweaking some of these, but it would be great to see what exists now. Then we could say, oh, okay, well, don't forget this, or this looks good, or whatever. That'd be great. And we can add that to Slack. Is there any other comments on the questions? Oh, sorry, we're on to initiatives, sorry.
Well, I guess the issue is that would anybody like to work with Bob? Is that the question too?
Bob, I'd like to work with you.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would like to connect in whatever small group is created on this piece.
Bob, I'm also interested.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right. So we will organize that offline. Um, okay, we are moving along. Administrative, Ms. Dre, select person current update on Slack.
Yeah, I think we covered this earlier.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we're good.
Awesome. Discussion, vote liaison with SPS DEI committee. Okay, so we don't need to actually vote on a liaison because they're basically there for us to fill us in on what's going on in their part of the Scituate world. But Miss Arnold, I'm not even sure if she's still with us because we're running
She
very
is.
late tonight. Oh, wonderful.
Yep.
If we could unmute Miss Arnold, that would
Yeah,
be
good to go.
great.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Hi, Ruth.
Hi. So I had a conversation, well, I had an email conversation with Superintendent Burkhead and told him about us, wanting to know if it was a good idea to have a representative from the school system participate with us. And he immediately got back to me, he said, absolutely. And it's Assistant Superintendent Jen Arnold is the person I would definitely suggest. And I spoke with her briefly today, and she is very excited to work together with us. So we don't have to vote, but would you like to say a few words, Ms. Arnold?
Sure. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity to represent the school district rather. And it's really good that we will have that connection between the town and the district, because I feel like we're existing in silos and we're doing parallel work at times. And this is one example. So we're a little further in this journey at the district than you are, although I don't profess to be any sort of expert. But we have done a number of things, and I'm happy to share those with you just as a point of reference or lessons learned and things we might do differently in the future. But I'm really pleased to be on this committee. You have a big task ahead of you, but you're doing some exciting things already, and just getting it organized and your goals. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Okay, so in our full committee emails, if we're sending out information, we will need to now, wait, is there anyone against Ms. Arnold joining us? This was something we talked about doing and seemed to want to do. Is there anyone against her joining us? No, good. I didn't think so.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled.
Nikki?
Absolutely thrilled.
Yeah, go right
Nikki?
ahead.
Can I just add too, in addition to Jen, the school committee also voted on a liaison. So if you can all just include Mike Hayes on the announcements of the agendas.
Oh, thank you. We
yeah.
did not know.
With Jen, no, yep, we didn't know either. So, so no problem. So we have both the school district and the school committee represented. That'd be great.
Wonderful. That's very good news. So those people will have to be added. We'll have to get Mr. Hayes's information to do that. Wonderful. Okay, discussion vote on adding the employee position as a voting member of this committee. I will say this, one, Ms. Silvera is fantastic and there's no two ways about it. Her demographic is absolutely perfect for this committee, and I'm thrilled that she's here with us. I think everyone is solid on their vote. I know some of you expressed your opinions already. So is there anyone else who wants to come?
I think the discussion, was to go to Maura, exactly, to see about selectmen. That was where we left it last week because Maura was not here.
Okay.
My understanding is that if we were interested in doing this, we would be voting for our recommendation. But we wanted to check in with Maura on the selectmen's view because they then have to make this decision.
Great.
Yeah, I think we handled it the same way we did with the change of the name, right? All of you can vote on it, and just, I think the question also came up, what happens if there's a tie? Yep. So if there is ever a tie, that is considered a motion that did not pass. So just keep that in mind, which is fine, happens all the time, happens at town meeting, happens everywhere. So it's nothing unusual in public debate.
Okay, Mara, can you just clarify what the quorum would be then? If it was 8 voting members, would that be 5? Because right now.
It would be, yes, 5. You always have to have a majority.
Okay, so in subcommittees then, that allows us to have 4 members in subcommittees?
I don't really know that I
'Cause
don't really know the answer to that. I don't really know that there's, you know,
Well, you'd have to have less than a quorum on the subcommittee.
yes, true.
Because right now we're at 3.
Right now, our subcommittees cannot have more than 3 voting members.
Oh, you meant voting members.
Yes.
Okay, I thought you meant like total membership.
No.
Yeah, I would just keep it the same, you know, just to.
Well, it's actually nicer if we could have more.
Yeah, right.
members in the subcommittee, just, spread the work. So if our quorum is now 5, our
Yeah.
subcommittees cannot have any more than 4
Than
voting
4.
members.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That makes sense.
All right. Thanks for
Your
clarifying.
math is better than mine this time of night.
Okay, so do we want to, is there any more further comment on recommending the employee position to the board of, to the select board? Okay, are we ready to vote? If so, I would need a motion.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, I need Tom. Tom was the movement. Who was the second?
Natasha.
Reverend Stewart, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I will call the roll. Ms. Dre,
Yes.
Ms. Harriman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Secor,
Yes.
Ms. Yassin,
Yes.
Reverend Stewart,
Yes.
Ms. Risha,
Yes.
and my vote. Yes. Okay. All right. I don't believe that there's new business because we've pushed a few things to the next agenda. I hear silence. Other business, I don't know that we have that. We've been pretty thorough tonight. Future agenda items we have established. So our next
Well,
meeting.
Nikki, can I suggest on future agenda items?
Okay.
I was surprised to see the public comments pushed to the front today because I felt we had a lot of business to do. And is this something you plan to continue regularly? And if so, if you're going to ask people to come to our meeting, I'd like a wider distribution so that more people actually know. If this is something where, especially if we have like an open forum and we want to give more time, then especially I'd like people to know. If we have kind of a standing 10 minutes at the beginning, it's kind of nice for people to, understand that this is what it is, and they can always give their points of view for us to start integrating into things that we're working on. But to think about sometime where we, and what do we do to really get out our resource gathering larger. We kind of touched on that in our group. And I think that that's something I thought about a lot as we were first coming into this. I didn't think we're really ready to start dealing with it in depth, but how do we see us gathering more information from our communities would be an awesome topic for people to start talking to us about.
Right, and the full answer to that is I don't know, because I don't know what will come up in the community where we need to solicit information from a particular group or on a particular topic. I think that we do post the agenda every week in time for everyone to see that on the town website. Some people are getting emails directly of the goings on. I'm not sure how we do that. where people can sign up to get notifications from our group. That would be better.
It's on
And
the
also-
town website. They can sign up for e-notifications, and I make sure that when I post the agenda that e-notifications go out to those people who've signed up.
Okay, so that is another way we can encourage people, friends, other members of other groups that we belong to sign up for that, so that they stay informed, because the minutes can be informative as well. But I
Add a
don't have any-
standing public comment time too, Nikki, like the school committee does and like the Board of Selectmen does. So
Right.
that way it's open to anybody that you want to allow in for, if it's 10 minutes, 5 minutes, like whatever that is.
Right. Yeah, we do usually have that, that piece involved, but it's typically towards the end of the meeting, and non-committee members have left.
Right,
So
that's why we might want to change that. I mean, maybe a 10 minutes at the beginning, but then it means that, again, with public comments, it's to listen to what they have to say. We may or may not weigh in on those comments, but to
Right.
get those in before people have gotten worn out
right,
might be a really
yeah.
good idea for our agenda to stay like that.
Right, yeah, I will definitely keep that in mind as we move forward, for sure. Yeah, and getting as many people as possible into the meeting is very important to me as well. Okay. Future meeting dates, our next meeting is March 16th. And those dates and stars, that you made a note that these are when we're finalizing preparation. So we have a couple more meetings before our first presentation. So let's keep that in mind. Any agenda items, I know Ms. Yassin always sends out an email requesting input into the agenda. So please take that seriously.
I don't send out requesting input into the agenda, Nikki. I haven't done so. I've requested, if you're going to submit information to the committee, please do so either on your own or to me, but I have never asked for input into agenda.
I thought information was included if you wanted to talk about something at the meeting. I'm sorry. I mean,
I haven't done so.
when you said information, I thought it meant, you know, the information that you want to talk about at the meeting as well. I didn't really understand that. In the same way, I'll say. Okay, so
do you wish to, Nikki, do you wish to ask people to submit information, you know, things that they would like on the agenda? Like I could submit a working agenda earlier and then have people give their input and get that set for you. And then you end up as chairperson, you set the agenda, but you would then have their input before that happened.
Well, we didn't necessarily, I mean, there were some things on the agenda that we didn't necessarily, you know, the people seemed fine with including certain things to the agenda that we didn't necessarily talk about including for the next meeting, which I think is great. If everyone feels comfortable saying, I'd like to get on the agenda or whatever, then that's great. But be sure to do that in time for Ms. Yassin to get the agenda out. So if what we have going on works, let's stick with that. But if it doesn't, someone will let me know. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Is there a second?
A second.
Wonderful. I will call the roll. Vice Chair Secor,
Yes.
Ms. Risha,
Yes.
Ms. Yassin,
Yes.
Ms. Dre,
Yes.
Ms. Harriman,
Yes.
Reverend Stewart,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. Okay, wonderful. That concludes this